My twin brother showed up at my door with bruises shaped like fingerprints. I'm Russell Hayes, and what happened next would destroy a marriage, send a man to prison, and save 890,000 from a predator who thought he'd found the perfect victim. See, Charles and I are identical twins. Same face, same voice, same everything. But Charles had money, and I was just an old mechanic. When my daughter's husband started visiting Charles twice a week, talking about memory problems and pushing for immediate care facility placement, I knew something was wrong. Those bruises told me everything I needed to know. What Carson Fletcher didn't realize was that he was threatening the wrong brother. And when I decided to switch places with Charles for just one day, I caught something on tape that would change everything. This story got crazy fast, and I know you're going to want to hear every detail. Hit that subscribe button because this is going to be wild, and I'd love to know where you're watching from. Here's how a 67-year-old auto mechanic outsmarted a predator and saved his twin brother's life. Charles and I are identical twins, but our lives took different paths 40 years ago. He became an insurance claims adjuster, bought a nice house, saved his money. I fixed cars, lived paycheck to paycheck, never married. When people see us together, they always knew which twin made it and which one didn't. That Tuesday morning in October, Charles knocked on my apartment door at 7 a.m. He never visits unannounced. His usually pressed shirt was wrinkled, his hands shaking as he held a coffee cup. "Russell, I need to talk." I noticed them immediately. Dark purple marks on his upper arms, the kind that come from someone grabbing too hard. Finger-shaped bruises. "Charles, what happened to your arms?" He pulled his sleeves down quickly. "It's nothing. I'm clumsy." My brother has never been clumsy in his life. Charles documents everything, keeps receipts from 1987, measures twice, and cuts once. Clumsy isn't in his vocabulary. "Linda thinks I should move to Meadowbrook Senior Care," he said, staring at his coffee. "She's worried about me living alone since Martha died." Linda is my daughter, Charles's niece. She's been a registered nurse for 18 years, works at Richmond General. Smart, caring, but she married Carson Fletcher 3 years ago and something changed. "What do you think about moving?" I asked. "I don't want to go, Russell, but Carson explains things, medical things I don't understand. He says my memory is getting worse." Carson Fletcher, medical equipment sales executive, drives a 2023 BMW X5, wears suits that cost more than my monthly rent. He sells hospital equipment to doctors' offices across Virginia, makes good money, talks like he knows everything about medicine. "Charles, your memory is fine. You remember every baseball stat from 1962. That's what I told them. But Carson said that's different. He said remembering old things while forgetting new things is a sign of dementia. I'd met Carson maybe 6 times in 3 years. Each time he treated me like I was invisible. At Linda's wedding, he introduced himself to everyone except me. At Christmas dinner, he talked over me when I asked about Charles's retirement investments. "Carson knows about medical stuff," Charles continued. "He visits me twice a week now, checks on me. He's been very helpful since Martha passed." "Helpful how?" "He helped me organize my financial papers, set up online banking so Linda can help if I need it. He explained Medicare changes, helped me understand my retirement account statements." Something cold settled in my stomach. Charles has been managing his own finances for 50 years. His retirement account has 890,000. Money he saved working double shifts and living modestly. He doesn't need help understanding bank statements. "Show me these bruises, Charles." He rolled up his sleeves reluctantly. 5 dark purple marks on each arm, thumb on one side, 4 fingers on the other. Someone had grabbed him hard enough to leave evidence. "Carson gets frustrated when I ask too many questions," Charles said quietly. "He says I repeat myself, that I'm not understanding simple concepts. Yesterday he grabbed my arms to make sure I was listening." "He put his hands on you?" "He was trying to help me understand, Russell. I was being difficult." My brother has never been difficult. Charles asks questions because he's careful, not confused. He wants to understand before he agrees to anything. I poured myself coffee with steady hands, but inside I was burning. Carson Fletcher was using his medical knowledge and my daughter's trust to manipulate an elderly man. And somehow, he was making my brother believe it was his own fault. "What did Linda say about the facility?" She toured it yesterday with Carson. They think I should move in Friday. Carson found an opening, said we need to act fast. Friday, 3 days away. Rush decisions aren't medical necessities, they're sales tactics. After Charles left, I sat in my 2018 Ford F-150 outside Meadowbrook Senior Care. The place looked nice enough. Brick buildings, manicured lawns, cheerful signs about active senior living. I walked into the main office and asked about pricing. Our memory care suites start at $2,400 per month, the receptionist said, sliding a glossy brochure across the counter. That includes meals, housekeeping, medication management, and 24-hour supervision. $2,400 times 12 months equals $28,800 per year. Charles's retirement account would last about 30 years at that rate, if there weren't any other expenses. But there would be. Medical costs, care upgrades, inflation. The money would disappear faster than sand through fingers. I drove to First National Bank, where Charles has banked for 23 years. Susan Martinez, the branch manager, knows both our families. Russell, good to see you. How's Charles doing since Martha's funeral? That's what I want to ask you about. Has anyone been in asking about his accounts recently? Her smile tightened slightly. You know I can't discuss customer information, even with family. I'm not asking for details. I'm asking if someone's been asking questions they shouldn't be asking. She glanced around, then leaned forward. A man came in 2 weeks ago with Charles. Well-dressed, professional, said he was helping Charles organize his finances after Martha's death. Asked very specific questions about account access, power of attorney requirements, and our policies for elderly customers with cognitive concerns. Carson Fletcher. Had to be. Did Charles seem confused or impaired to you? Russell, I've known your brother for over 20 years. He asked the same detailed questions he always asks. Wanted copies of every form, read everything twice, sharp as ever. I thanked Susan and drove to Charles's house, a modest 3-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood. Martha's car was still in the garage. Charles's 1987 Buick LeSabre sat in the driveway, clean and perfectly maintained. I used my spare key to go inside. Everything was organized, labeled, filed away. This wasn't the home of someone with dementia. This was the home of someone who controlled every detail of his environment. On the kitchen table sat a manila folder labeled Meadowbrook Information, Linda and Carson. Inside were financial disclosure forms, medical history questionnaires, and power of attorney documents. At the bottom, I found a contract. Admission agreement for Charles Hayes. Move-in date, Friday, October 27th. Monthly fee, $2,400. Financial responsibility, Charles Hayes, primary. Linda Hayes, Fletcher, secondary. Power of attorney, Carson Fletcher, temporary. Linda Hayes Fletcher, permanent upon admission. Carson Fletcher would have temporary power of attorney over Charles's finances from the moment he entered that facility. I photographed every page with my phone. In Charles's desk drawer, I found his daily journal, a habit he's maintained for 47 years. The recent entries told a different story than the one Carson was selling. October 10th. Carson visited again, asked about my will, retirement accounts, says I seem confused about dates, but I'm not confused. I remember everything. He gets angry when I ask him to explain things twice. October 15th. Linda called, very concerned about my memory. Carson told her I forgot our conversation about Medicare. I didn't forget. We never had that conversation. He's putting words in my mouth. October 20th. Carson grabbed my arms today when I questioned the facility costs. Said I need to trust people who understand these things. His grip left marks. I'm scared of him, but Linda thinks he's helping. October 23rd. Signed papers Carson brought. He said they were Medicare updates, but I couldn't read them all. He rushed me. Linda wasn't there. I think I made a mistake. Charles wasn't confused. He was being systematically intimidated and isolated by someone who knew exactly how to manipulate both medical terminology and family dynamics. I called my daughter Linda at work. Dad, I can't talk long. We're swamped. Linda, I need to ask you about Uncle Charles moving to Meadowbrook. Oh, good. Carson said he'd talk to you about it. Uncle Charles really needs professional care, Dad. His memory is getting worse every week. What specific memory problems have you observed? Carson's been documenting everything. Uncle Charles forgets conversations, repeats questions, gets confused about his medications. Carson thinks he might have early-stage dementia. Have you seen these memory problems yourself, Linda? Not Carson's reports? Your own observations? A pause. Well, Carson spends more time with Uncle Charles than I do. He has medical training, Dad. He knows what to look for. Carson Fletcher doesn't have medical training. He sells medical equipment. But Linda trusted him, and that trust was being weaponized against her own family. If Charles entered that facility Friday, Carson would control his finances. Within months, maybe weeks, decisions would be made about Charles's deteriorating condition that would drain his life savings into care he didn't need. The stakes weren't just financial. They were about dignity, family, and whether a man who'd worked his entire life would spend his final years as a victim of financial abuse. I decided to confront Carson directly. Wednesday afternoon, I drove to Linda's house in my pickup truck. Carson's BMW sat in the driveway like a statement about who belonged and who didn't. Linda answered the door in her scrubs, just home from her shift. "Dad, what are you doing here?" "I need to talk to Carson about Uncle Charles. He's on an important call with a hospital in Norfolk. Can this wait?" "No, it can't." Carson appeared behind Linda, phone pressed to his ear. He looked annoyed to see me. "I'll call you back," he said into the phone, then fixed his attention on me. "Russell, what brings you by?" Charles showed me some bruises on his arms, finger-shaped bruises. Carson's expression didn't change. "Charles falls sometimes, grabs onto things for support. Bruising is common in elderly people, especially those with balance issues." "He said you grabbed him." "Russell, I think you're misunderstanding the situation." Carson stepped onto the porch, closing the door behind him. Charles gets confused about physical interactions. Yesterday I had to steady him when he stumbled. He might have interpreted that as grabbing. I studied Carson's face. Smooth, confident, practiced. This was someone who explained away problems for a living. "Charles seems fine to me." "That's exactly the problem, Russell." Carson moved closer, using his height advantage. At 6'2" in expensive shoes, he towered over my 5'9" frame. "You see what you want to see. I see medical reality." "What medical reality?" Charles exhibited short-term memory loss during our conversation Monday. He asked the same question 3 times in 10 minutes. He couldn't remember our discussion from the previous week about Medicare supplements. Maybe he wanted clarification. Carson's patience was wearing thin. I could see it in the tightness around his eyes. "Russell, you fix cars. I work with medical professionals every day. I understand cognitive decline symptoms. You sell equipment. You're not a doctor. I have more medical knowledge in my little finger than you have in your entire body." Linda opened the door. "Is everything okay out here?" "Your father has some concerns about Charles's care," Carson said, his voice returning to professional smoothness. "I'm trying to explain the medical necessities." "Dad, Carson's been so helpful with Uncle Charles. He's probably saved us from making costly mistakes." Carson smiled at Linda, then looked back at me. "Russell, I understand this is difficult. Nobody wants to admit when a family member needs help, but denial doesn't change medical facts." "What medical facts? Who diagnosed Charles with anything?" "Early-stage dementia doesn't require formal diagnosis for care decisions. Family members and medical professionals can observe symptoms and act preventively." Carson wasn't just dismissing my concerns. He was educating me like I was stupid. "Charles has $890,000 in retirement savings," I said. "I'm aware of Charles's financial situation. That's exactly why proper care planning is critical." The way he said "I'm aware" made my skin crawl. How was he aware? Why was he aware? Who made you aware of his finances? Carson's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Charles shared that information when we discussed his care options. Transparency is important in family financial planning." "Did Charles volunteer those numbers, or did you ask specific questions?" "Russell, I'm trying to help your family avoid a crisis. Charles needs professional care before his condition worsens. Meadowbrook has an opening Friday. If we wait, he might not get another opportunity for months." "Convenient timing." "What's that supposed to mean?" You've been visiting Charles twice a week for 2 months. Suddenly, there's a memory crisis that requires immediate action, and you just happen to know about a facility opening. Carson stepped back, his professional mask slipping slightly. I think you're letting paranoia cloud your judgment. I think you're letting greed cloud yours. Dad? Linda's voice carried shock and embarrassment. Carson is trying to help. Carson held up his hand. It's okay, Linda. Russell's emotional response is understandable. This is his brother we're discussing. Don't patronize me. I'm not patronizing you, Russell. I'm recognizing that you're out of your depth here. This isn't about changing oil or rotating tires. This is about complex medical and financial decisions that require expertise. Whose expertise? Yours? Among others, yes. I've consulted with geriatricians, elder care specialists, and financial advisors who understand these situations. Name one. Carson's eyes narrowed. Excuse me? Name one geriatrician you've consulted about Charles. I don't think I need to justify my professional consultations to someone who... Someone who what? Someone who doesn't understand the complexities involved in elder care decisions. The dismissal was complete. In Carson's world, I was irrelevant. Too uneducated, too poor, too simple to have opinions about my own brother's welfare. Charles is scared of you, I said quietly. That's not true. He flinches when you grab his arms. I've never grabbed Charles inappropriately. Those bruises say otherwise. Carson looked at Linda, then back at me. His voice dropped to a warning tone. Russell, I think you need to be very careful about making accusations you can't prove. Charles is confused about many things lately. His perceptions aren't reliable. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Charles's word against Carson's. A confused old man against a medical professional. We're done here, I said. Yes, we are. Carson opened the door to Linda. Charles moves to Meadowbrook Friday morning. Linda has already signed the preliminary paperwork. As I walked to my truck, I heard Carson's voice through the open door. Your father means well, Linda, but he's not equipped to understand these medical realities. Sometimes family members become obstacles to necessary care. I drove away knowing that Carson Fletcher had just made his biggest mistake. He'd shown me exactly who he was. That evening, I called Dr. Elizabeth Norton. She's been bringing her cars to my shop for 15 years. A 2019 Honda Accord for daily driving, and a restored 1965 Mustang convertible that's her pride and joy. Russell, good to hear from you. Is this about the Mustang's carburetor? Actually, Dr. Norton, I need some advice. Medical advice. I'm listening. I explained Charles's situation without naming Carson specifically. Dr. Norton listened without interrupting. Russell, what you're describing sounds like potential elder abuse. Has your brother been evaluated by a qualified geriatrician? No formal evaluation. The person pushing for care placement claims medical expertise, but he's actually in medical equipment sales. That's a red flag. Legitimate cognitive assessments require qualified physicians, standardized testing, and time. Rush decisions about care placement are almost always inappropriate. Would you be willing to evaluate my brother? Absolutely. I've been a geriatrician for 22 years. I know the difference between normal aging and cognitive impairment. There's one more thing, Dr. Norton. My brother and I are identical twins. A pause. How identical? Our own mother couldn't tell us apart until we were 12. Interesting. When would you like to schedule the evaluation? Tomorrow afternoon. And, Dr. Norton, the evaluation might need to be unconventional. After hanging up, I drove to Charles's house. He was in his kitchen, organizing bills into neat stacks. Hardly the behavior of someone with dementia. Russell, I'm glad you came by. Carson's picking me up tomorrow for a final tour of Meadowbrook. He wants to make sure I understand the facility layout before Friday. What time is he coming? 2:00. He said Linda can't make it. She's working a double shift. Perfect. Carson would be alone with Charles, away from witnesses. Charles, I want to show you something. I pulled out a cardboard box from my truck. Inside were identical clothes. Everything from underwear to shoes. Purchased that afternoon from the same stores where Charles shops. Why do you have my clothes? Because we used to switch places when we were kids, remember? You'd take my math tests. I'd take your history tests. Charles smiled. The first genuine smile I'd seen from him in weeks. Mom never figured it out until high school. I need you to trust me tomorrow, Charles. Can you do that? What are you planning? I'm planning to be you for a few hours, and I'm planning to find out what Carson Fletcher really wants. I spent the next hour reviewing Charles's daily routines, his mannerisms, the way he organized his thoughts. We practiced conversations, reviewed his medical history, and went through his recent interactions with Carson. Charles, has Carson ever asked specific questions about your will or beneficiaries? Last week he asked if I'd updated anything since Martha died. He said it was important to review estate planning after a spouse passes. Did you give him details? I told him Linda is my primary beneficiary and you're secondary. He asked about the amounts, said he wanted to make sure there wouldn't be tax problems. Carson wasn't just after the retirement account. He was mapping Charles's entire financial picture. Has he asked about your daily routine when you're home when you go out? He knows I grocery shop Mondays, see Dr. Williams monthly, and visit Martha's grave Sundays. He said consistency is important for cognitive health. Carson had been studying Charles like a predator studies prey, learning habits, vulnerabilities, timing. One more thing, Charles. I want you to keep this journal with you tomorrow. I handed him a small recording device disguised as a notebook. Just flip this switch when Carson arrives. What will that do? It'll record everything he says, everything he does, every threat he makes when he thinks no one is listening. Charles held the device carefully. Russell, what if this backfires? What if Carson finds out? Then we'll have bigger problems than financial abuse. But Charles, what if we do nothing? What happens to you in that facility when Carson has that legal control over your money? My brother nodded slowly. For the first time in weeks, Charles Hayes looked like the careful, methodical man I'd known my entire life. Tomorrow we switch places one more time, I said, but this time we're not fooling our mother. We're catching a predator. Thursday evening, Linda invited me to dinner. Dad, I want to clear the air about yesterday. Carson feels terrible about the misunderstanding. I arrived at Linda's house at 6 p.m. wearing my cleanest jeans and a button-down shirt. Carson was already there, preparing what looked like an expensive meal, herb-crusted salmon with quinoa and roasted vegetables. Russell, Carson said without looking up from the stove. Glad you could join us. Hope you like salmon. I usually stick to simpler food. I imagine you do. Linda's neighbors, Tom and Barbara Anderson, were also there. Tom retired from the post office last year. Barbara volunteers at the library. Good people who've known our family for decades. Russell, how's the auto repair business? Tom asked. Steady. People always need their cars fixed. Must be nice to work with your hands, Carson interjected. Simple, straightforward problems. Turn a wrench, replace a part, problem solved. Barbara laughed. I wish everything in life was that easy. Some problems require more sophisticated solutions, Carson continued, pouring wine into expensive glasses. Complex situations need expertise, not just manual labor. The condescension was subtle but unmistakable. Carson was establishing hierarchy from the first exchange. During dinner, conversation turned to Charles's situation. Russell's been concerned about Uncle Charles moving to Meadowbrook, Linda said. Understandable, Barbara replied. It's hard to accept when family members need more care. Carson set down his fork carefully. What's difficult is when family members can't recognize medical realities. Charles exhibits clear signs of cognitive decline, but Russell seems to think casual observation trumps professional assessment. What professional assessment? I asked. I've documented specific instances of memory loss, confusion, and impaired judgment over the past 8 weeks. You documented them. You're not a doctor. Carson's smile was patient but strained. Russell, I work with medical professionals every day. I understand diagnostic criteria for cognitive impairment. Understanding and diagnosing are different things. True, which is why I've consulted with specialists who agree that Charles needs supervised care. Tom leaned forward. Charles seemed fine when I saw him at the grocery store Monday, sharp as always. Carson's jaw tightened slightly. Early-stage dementia is characterized by good days and bad days. Patients can appear normal in familiar situations while struggling with new information or complex decisions. Like deciding whether to move to an expensive care facility? I asked. Exactly like that. Charles can't properly evaluate the risks of living alone or the benefits of professional care. Barbara looked concerned. What kind of risks? Carson warmed to his subject. Medication errors, falls, financial confusion, social isolation. Charles has already shown signs of poor judgment with money management. What signs? Tom asked. He couldn't explain recent changes to his Medicare plan, got confused about retirement account statements, asked the same questions about insurance benefits multiple times. I studied Carson's face as he spoke. Confident, authoritative, building a case with medical terminology that sounded impressive to laypeople. Maybe he asked multiple questions because he wanted to understand, I said. Carson's patience evaporated. Russell, you're out of your depth here. This isn't about changing oil in someone's driveway. This is about complex medical and financial decisions that require actual expertise. The room went quiet. Linda looked embarrassed. The Andersons looked uncomfortable. What kind of expertise? I asked quietly. The kind that comes from years of working with healthcare professionals, understanding medical systems, and recognizing when someone's cognitive abilities are declining. You sell medical equipment. Carson's voice rose slightly. I work with doctors, nurses, and hospital administrators every day. I understand healthcare delivery better than someone who's never worked outside an auto repair shop. Carson, Linda said softly. No, Linda. This needs to be said. Your father means well, but he doesn't understand the complexities involved in elder care. Charles needs professional assessment and supervised care. Russell's emotional attachment is preventing him from seeing medical facts. Barbara Anderson's expression had changed. She was watching Carson with new attention. Charles seemed very alert when we talked, she said. Asked detailed questions about Tom's retirement planning. Carson turned to Barbara with forced patience. Mrs. Anderson, I appreciate your concern, but casual conversation isn't a reliable indicator of cognitive function. Charles might remember old information while struggling with new concepts. What new concepts? Tom asked. Understanding his changing healthcare needs, evaluating care options, managing complex financial decisions. I saw my opening. Carson, Charles has been managing complex financial decisions for 50 years. He saved $890,000 working as an insurance adjuster, which is exactly why proper oversight is critical now that his judgment is compromised. How do you know how much money Charles has saved? Carson realized his mistake immediately. The number had slipped out too casually, too precisely. Charles shared that information during our discussions about care planning. Did he volunteer those specific figures, or did you ask for them? Financial transparency is important when family members are planning elder care. Barbara Anderson leaned forward. Carson, are you Charles's financial advisor? I'm helping the family understand care costs and payment options. But you're not a financial advisor, Tom said slowly. I have extensive experience with medical care costs and insurance reimbursements. You sell equipment to hospitals, I said. That doesn't make you qualified to handle someone else's retirement savings. Carson's composure cracked. Russell, you don't understand the first thing about healthcare financing, medical insurance, or elder care planning. You fix cars for a living. You live in a 2-bedroom apartment and drive a pickup truck. What exactly qualifies you to question people who actually understand these complex systems? The room fell silent. Carson had just revealed exactly what he thought about me, and by extension, what he thought about anyone who didn't meet his standards of success. Linda stared at her husband. The Andersons looked shocked. I think we should go, Barbara said quietly. As Tom and Barbara gathered their coats, Barbara pulled me aside. Russell, those bruises on Charles's arms, when did you first notice them? Tuesday morning. I saw them too at the grocery store. He tried to hide them, but I've seen those marks before. Someone grabbed him hard enough to leave fingerprints. After the Andersons left, Linda confronted Carson. You were incredibly rude to my father. I was being honest about a difficult situation. Your father's emotional involvement is clouding his judgment about Charles's medical needs. I stood to leave. Charles moves to Meadowbrook tomorrow? Yes, Carson said firmly. The decision's been made. I looked at Linda. You're okay with this timeline? Carson knows what's best medically, Dad. As I reached the door, Carson called out, Russell, I hope you understand that sometimes family members need to step aside and let qualified people handle complex situations. I turned back to face him. Carson, I hope you understand that sometimes qualified people aren't as smart as they think they are. Walking to my truck, I felt the weight of what was coming. Carson Fletcher had just publicly humiliated me based on class, education, and economic status. He'd revealed his contempt for anyone he considered beneath him. Tomorrow, I'd show him exactly how smart this old mechanic could be. Friday morning at 8 a.m., I arrived at Charles's house carrying identical clothes and a detailed plan. My brother was nervous but determined. "Are you sure this will work, Russell?" "Charles, we fooled everyone for 16 years. We can fool Carson for 3 hours." I helped Charles set up the recording device, then walked him through my apartment layout and daily routine. If Carson asks why you're at my place, tell him you wanted to say goodbye before entering the facility. What if he gets suspicious? Carson's arrogance is our advantage. He sees what he expects to see, a confused old man who needs his guidance. At 9:30 a.m., Charles left for my apartment. I put on his clothes, studied myself in his bathroom mirror. Same height, same build, same gray hair and blue eyes. 67 years old, identical down to the liver spots on our hands. At 1:45 p.m., I heard Carson's BMW in the driveway. I opened the door before he knocked. "Carson, right on time." "Charles, ready for the tour? This is an important day for your future." "I have some questions first. Come in." Carson entered, carrying a leather portfolio and wearing a confident smile. "I know change is scary, Charles, but Meadowbrook is going to be perfect for your needs." "Boop." "Sit down," I said, gesturing to the kitchen table. "I want to understand something." Carson sat across from me, opening his portfolio. "What would you like to know?" "Why the rush? Why does everything have to happen today?" "Charles, we've discussed this. Your condition is progressing. Waiting could mean missing this opportunity for months." "My condition?" Carson's patience was already thinning. "Your memory issues, confusion about financial matters, difficulty managing daily activities?" "Give me specific examples." Carson sighed dramatically. "Charles, you asked me the same question about Medicare supplements 4 times last week. You couldn't remember our conversation about power of attorney documents. Yesterday you seemed confused about the facility tour timing." I leaned forward slightly. "Carson, I want you to be completely honest with me. What happens to my money when I move to Meadowbrook?" "Your money remains your money, Charles. Linda will help manage it to ensure your care needs are met." "And you'll have no access to my accounts?" Carson's eyes flickered. "Only temporarily, to facilitate the transition. Once you're settled and Linda has permanent power of attorney, my involvement will be minimal." "How minimal?" "Charles, why are these questions important now? We should focus on your care needs, not financial details." "Because it's my money, my life savings. I want to understand exactly who controls what." Carson set down his pen, frustration showing. "Charles, this is exactly the kind of circular thinking that demonstrates your cognitive decline. You're fixating on details instead of seeing the bigger picture." "What bigger picture?" "Your safety, your health, your family's peace of mind." I pulled out Charles's financial statements. "Carson, explain to me why Meadowbrook costs $2,400 per month when similar facilities charge $1,800. Quality care costs more. Meadowbrook has better staffing ratios, newer facilities, specialized programs. According to this contract, I'm paying $600 monthly for care coordination services. What does that mean?" Carson's jaw tightened. "Care coordination involves family communication, medical liaison services, financial oversight." "Financial oversight provided by whom?" "Qualified professionals who understand healthcare financing." "Professionals like you?" "Charles, I'm trying to help your family navigate a complex system. These questions suggest you're not processing information clearly." I stood up and moved to the window, keeping my back to Carson. "I've been thinking about our conversations over the past 2 months." "Good. Reflection is important." "I remember every conversation we've had, Carson. Every question you asked about my finances. Every time you suggested I was confused or forgetting things." "Charles, turn around and look at me." I heard his chair scrape against the floor. "I remember you grabbing my arms when I asked too many questions. I remember you telling me my perceptions weren't reliable." "Charles, you're agitated. This emotional volatility is another symptom we need to address. I turned around slowly. Carson was standing now, his professional mask slipping. I'm not agitated, Carson. I'm angry. Charles, sit down. Let's discuss this calmly. I'm angry because you've been lying to my family. You've been isolating me, intimidating me, and planning to steal my life savings. Carson stepped closer. Charles, you're having an episode. These paranoid thoughts aren't based in reality. They're based in recordings. Carson froze. What recordings? I pulled out Charles's phone. Every conversation we've had for the past 2 weeks. Every threat. Every admission about financial access. Every time you grabbed my arms to make me listen. Charles, give me that phone. Why? Afraid of what people might hear? Carson lunged forward, reaching for the device. I stepped back, and he grabbed my arm, the same aggressive grip that left bruises on Charles. You confused old man. You don't understand what you're doing. The front door opened. Dr. Norton walked in, carrying her medical bag. Am I interrupting something? She asked calmly. Carson spun around, still gripping my arm. Who are you? Dr. Elizabeth Norton, geriatrician. I'm here for Charles's cognitive evaluation. Carson released my arm immediately. There's been a mistake. Charles doesn't need evaluation. He's been assessed by qualified professionals. Really? Which professionals? Carson straightened his tie, composing himself. I work with medical experts who've observed concerning symptoms. I see. Dr. Norton set down her bag. And you are? Carson Fletcher. I'm Charles's son-in-law, helping coordinate his care transition. What's your medical background, Mr. Fletcher? I work in healthcare, medical equipment sales and consultation. Dr. Norton smiled politely. I see. Well, I'm a board-certified geriatrician with 22 years of experience. Shall we proceed with the evaluation? Carson looked trapped. Doctor, Charles is scheduled to move to Meadowbrook this afternoon. The evaluation isn't necessary. Mr. Fletcher, competency evaluations are always necessary before major care transitions. It's standard medical protocol. For the next 30 minutes, Dr. Norton conducted a thorough cognitive assessment. Memory tests, problem-solving exercises, orientation questions, and detailed conversation about current events and personal history. Carson sat in the corner, growing more agitated as I answered every question correctly and demonstrated complete mental clarity. Charles, Dr. Norton concluded, your cognitive function is entirely normal for someone your age. I see no evidence of dementia, significant memory impairment, or diminished capacity. Carson shot to his feet. That's impossible. Charles exhibits clear symptoms of cognitive decline, confusion, memory loss, poor judgment. Based on what diagnostic criteria? Dr. Norton asked. Based on documented behavioral observations over 8 weeks of interaction. Mr. Fletcher, you're not qualified to diagnose cognitive impairment. Medical diagnosis requires proper training, standardized assessments, and clinical protocols. Carson's composure cracked completely. Charles needs supervised care. His family agrees. This evaluation is meaningless. Mr. Fletcher, are you Charles's legal guardian? No, but I have power of attorney for care decisions. May I see that documentation? Carson fumbled through his portfolio, pulling out papers. Dr. Norton examined them carefully. Mr. Fletcher, this power of attorney isn't executed yet. It requires Charles's signature and notarization. Charles signed it yesterday. I spoke for the first time in 30 minutes. Carson, I never signed anything giving you power of attorney. Charles, you're confused again. We discussed this yesterday. Dr. Norton looked at me, then at Carson. Gentlemen, there seems to be some confusion here. Charles appears completely competent to make his own decisions about care. Carson's face went red. Doctor, you're making a mistake. Charles is not competent to refuse necessary care. Mr. Fletcher, based on what medical authority do you make that claim? Carson realized he was trapped. No medical credentials, no legal authority, no legitimate justification for forced care placement. Charles, he said, turning to me with desperation, you need help. You can't live alone safely. Your family is trying to protect you. I looked him straight in the eyes. Carson, my family is protecting me, just not the way you expected. Dr. Norton packed her medical bag. Charles, in my professional opinion, you're fully capable of independent living. I'll document that in my report. After Dr. Norton left, Carson faced me across Charles's kitchen table. His expensive suit couldn't hide the fact that his carefully constructed plan had just collapsed. Charles, you're making a terrible mistake. I smiled at Carson Fletcher. No, you made the terrible mistake. You underestimated the wrong brother. Carson left Charles's house in angry confusion, but I knew he wouldn't give up. Men like Carson Fletcher don't accept defeat quietly. They escalate. At 4:30 p.m., my phone rang. Dad, Carson says Uncle Charles had some kind of breakdown during the facility tour. He's very concerned about Uncle Charles's mental state. What kind of breakdown, Linda? Paranoid thoughts about financial theft, aggressive behavior, refusing to cooperate with care professionals. Carson thinks Uncle Charles might need emergency psychiatric evaluation. Emergency psychiatric evaluation. If Carson could get Charles committed for mental health concerns, he could still access financial control through medical necessity. Linda, I need you to meet me at Attorney Whitman's office at 6 o'clock. Bring Carson. Dad, what's going on? Your uncle needs legal protection, and your husband needs to answer some questions. Barbara Whitman has been Charles's attorney for 12 years, handling his will, Martha's estate, and retirement planning. Her office sits on Main Street in a restored Victorian house. At 6 p.m. sharp, Linda and Carson walked into the conference room where I sat with Charles, Attorney Whitman, and Dr. Norton. Carson stopped in the doorway. Charles, what are you doing here? Protecting my interests, Charles replied calmly. Linda looked confused. Uncle Charles, Carson said you were having psychiatric problems this afternoon. Attorney Whitman gestured to empty chairs. Please sit down. We need to discuss several legal matters concerning Mr. Charles Hayes. Carson remained standing. Who called this meeting? I did, Charles said. I have concerns about recent attempts to manipulate my care decisions and access my financial accounts. Charles, you're having another episode, Carson said. These paranoid thoughts aren't based in reality. Dr. Norton opened her folder. Mr. Fletcher, I conducted a comprehensive cognitive evaluation of Charles Hayes today. I found no evidence of dementia, significant memory impairment, or diminished mental capacity. Carson's face flushed. Your evaluation contradicts documented behavioral observations over 8 weeks. What documented observations? Attorney Whitman asked. Carson pulled out his portfolio. Memory loss, confusion about financial matters, impaired judgment, aggressive behavior. Mr. Fletcher, Attorney Whitman continued, do you have medical training? I work in healthcare. I understand cognitive decline symptoms. But you're not a licensed medical professional? No, but I consult with medical experts. Which experts? Carson hesitated. Various healthcare professionals in my network. Attorney Whitman made notes. Mr. Fletcher, yesterday you brought power of attorney documents to this office, requesting immediate execution for Mr. Hayes's care decisions. Yes, Charles needs legal protection due to his diminishing capacity. Based on whose determination of diminished capacity? Based on clear behavioral evidence and family concern. I pulled out Charles's phone. Attorney Whitman, I'd like you to hear something. Charles, what are you doing? Carson's voice carried warning. I pressed play. Carson's voice filled the conference room. You confused old man, you don't understand what you're doing. The recording continued with Carson's threats, his admission of financial planning, and his physical intimidation. Linda's hand went to her mouth. Carson, is that your voice? Carson stared at the phone. That recording is taken out of context. What context justifies threatening an elderly man? Dr. Norton asked. Charles was having an episode. I was trying to calm him down. Attorney Whitman stopped the recording. Mr. Fletcher, this audio contains what appears to be threats of physical violence and coercive behavior toward my client. Charles is confused about the interaction. His memory isn't reliable. Mr. Fletcher, I said quietly, the man you threatened wasn't Charles. Carson's face went white. What? Charles wasn't home this afternoon. I was. That's impossible. Charles stood up and moved to stand beside me. For the first time, Linda saw us together. Identical twins, dressed identically, standing side by side. Charles and Russell, Linda whispered. I'm Russell Hayes. I said. "I've been recording your conversations with my brother for 2 weeks." Carson staggered backward. "You can't. This is some kind of fraud." "The fraud is yours, Carson," Attorney Whitman said, "attempting to gain power of attorney through false claims of incompetence, financial manipulation of an elderly person, and physical intimidation." "I was trying to help the family." "By stealing Charles's life savings?" I asked. "I wasn't stealing anything." Dr. Norton spoke calmly. "Mr. Fletcher, your recorded statements suggest otherwise. You mentioned financial access, care coordination fees, and controlling decisions about Mr. Hayes's money." Carson looked at Linda desperately. "Linda, they're twisting everything. I was protecting Charles from financial mistakes." Linda stared at her husband. "Carson, you told me Uncle Charles was confused and paranoid, but he wasn't confused. He was scared of you. Linda, please. You lied to me about his mental condition. You forged documents. You threatened him physically." Carson's last defense crumbled. "Charles needed help. He couldn't manage complex decisions." "Charles manages his finances better than most people half his age," Attorney Whitman said. "His accounts are organized, his bills are current, and his investments are sound." "But he asked repetitive questions. He seemed confused about insurance changes." "He asked questions because he's careful," I said. "Charles has always asked detailed questions before making decisions. That's not confusion, that's wisdom." Carson slumped into a chair. "I was trying to help." "You were trying to steal $890,000, Charles said firmly. Attorney Whitman closed her folder. "Mr. Fletcher, I'm obligated to report this attempted financial fraud to Adult Protective Services and local law enforcement. Legal consequences will include criminal charges for elder abuse, attempted fraud, and coercive behavior," Dr. Norton added. Linda stood up slowly. "Carson, I want you to leave. Don't come to the house. Don't contact Uncle Charles. Don't contact my father. Linda, you're making a mistake. The mistake was trusting you with my family's welfare." Carson looked around the room one last time. At the attorney who would file reports, the doctor who would testify, the brothers who had outsmarted him, and the wife who finally saw through his manipulation. "This isn't over," he said weakly. "Yes, it is," Charles replied. "Your access to my life, my money, and my family is permanently revoked." Carson Fletcher walked out of that conference room a defeated man. His carefully constructed plan to steal an elderly man's life savings had been destroyed by something he never saw coming: the quiet power of family loyalty and careful planning. Attorney Whitman filed the necessary reports that evening. Dr. Norton documented Charles's perfect mental competency, and I finally understood that sometimes protecting family means becoming someone you never thought you could be, even if that someone is your identical twin brother. The consequences for Carson Fletcher came swiftly and completely. Monday morning, his employer, MedTech Solutions, terminated his contract after learning about the elder abuse investigation. Company policy prohibited employees from any involvement in financial fraud, especially targeting vulnerable populations. Medical equipment sales requires absolute trust with healthcare providers, his supervisor explained in the termination letter. Your actions have compromised that trust irreparably. Carson's base salary of $87,000 plus commission disappeared overnight. His BMW X5, financed, not owned, was repossessed within 10 days. Tuesday afternoon, Adult Protective Services opened a formal investigation. Detective Sarah Walsh, who specializes in elder financial abuse, interviewed Charles, Dr. Bate, Norton, Attorney Whitman, and myself. "Mr. Fletcher's scheme shows sophisticated understanding of elder manipulation tactics," Detective Walsh explained. "He isolated the victim, undermined family confidence, created artificial time pressure, and positioned himself as the only qualified authority." The investigation revealed Carson's pattern extended beyond Charles. 3 other elderly clients from his medical equipment sales territory had reported similar pressure tactics. One 73-year-old widower in Norfolk discovered Carson had gained access to his bank accounts through temporary assistance during a medical crisis. "Fletcher targets recently widowed men with substantial savings," Detective Walsh continued. "He builds trust through professional appearances and medical terminology, then creates crises requiring immediate financial decisions. Wednesday morning brought divorce papers. Linda filed for dissolution of marriage, citing fraud, deception, and irreconcilable differences. I trusted Carson with my family's welfare, Linda told Attorney Whitman. He exploited that trust to prey on vulnerable elderly relatives. I can't remain married to someone who would abuse my uncle for money. Linda moved back to her maiden name immediately. Hayes Fletcher became Hayes again. The divorce proceedings revealed Carson's financial desperation. His investment portfolio had lost $47,000 in cryptocurrency speculation. Credit card debt totaled $23,000. His expensive lifestyle was funded entirely through debt and aggressive sales commissions. Charles's retirement savings represented financial salvation, Detective Walsh explained. Carson saw $890,000 as the solution to his personal financial crisis. Thursday brought the most damaging consequences: public exposure. The Richmond Times-Dispatch ran a front-page story, "Local Man Charged with Elder Financial Abuse Scheme," and the article included Carson's photo, employment history, and details about his manipulation tactics. This case highlights the vulnerability of elderly citizens to financial predators who use professional credentials and family relationships to gain trust, the article stated. Carson's LinkedIn profile disappeared. His professional references stopped returning calls. Medical equipment companies throughout Virginia circulated warnings about hiring him. Friday afternoon, Charles and I met with Detective Walsh for final statement review. "Mr. Hayes, your brother's investigation work was exceptionally thorough," Detective Walsh said. "The recorded conversations provide irrefutable evidence of coercive behavior and fraudulent intent." "Russell did what law enforcement couldn't do," Charles replied. "He got inside Carson's operation." "The identity swap was brilliant," Detective Walsh continued. "Mr. Fletcher never suspected he was incriminating himself to the wrong brother." Dr. Norton's medical evaluation proved crucial for legal proceedings. Her 22 years of geriatric experience provided unshakable testimony about Charles's mental competency. "Carson Fletcher isn't medically qualified to assess anyone's cognitive function," Dr. Norton testified. "His claims about Mr. Hayes's diminished capacity were completely false." The broader impact extended through our community. Barbara Anderson, who witnessed Carson's arrogant behavior at dinner, became an advocate for elder abuse awareness. "I started paying attention to how other people treat elderly neighbors," Barbara explained. Carson's attitude toward Russell revealed his true character: condescending, manipulative, predatory. Tom Anderson organized a community education program about financial abuse warning signs. Carson Fletcher looked professional, sounded authoritative, and used medical terminology convincingly. That's exactly how predators operate. Linda's nursing colleagues at Richmond General learned about the case through hospital gossip. Several nurses reported similar concerns about family members facing pressure for unnecessary care placements. "Linda's experience opened our eyes," explained Nancy Peterson, charge nurse in geriatrics. "We're now more alert to family dynamics that might indicate financial manipulation." 2 months later, Charles received notification that Carson's other elderly victims had been identified. The collective financial damage exceeded $340,000 across 4 families. "Mr. Fletcher's prosecution will prevent future victims," Detective Walsh assured us. "His conviction will carry significant prison time plus restitution requirements." Carson's sentencing hearing was scheduled for spring. Charges included elder abuse, attempted fraud, coercive behavior, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes. "The evidence against Mr. Fletcher is overwhelming," the prosecutor explained. "Recorded confessions, witness testimony, and documented pattern of abuse across multiple victims." Charles's life returned to normal with enhanced security measures. Attorney Whitman established additional protections for his financial accounts, requiring dual authorization for any major transactions. No one can access Charles's money without his explicit consent and independent verification, Attorney Whitman explained. Dr. Norton continued providing Charles with annual cognitive assessments, creating official documentation of his continued mental competency. "Charles's cognitive function remains excellent," Dr. Norton reported. No evidence of any impairment that would justify supervised care. The most important consequence was family healing. Linda's trust in her father's judgment was restored after seeing how Carson had manipulated her medical expertise. Dad, you saw through Carson's lies when I couldn't, Linda admitted. You protected Uncle Charles when I was being used as an unwitting accomplice. Charles and I grew closer through the experience. Our twin bond, dormant for decades, had been reactivated by shared purpose. Russell, you saved my life, Charles said simply. Not just my money, my independence, my dignity, my future. The case became a teaching example for adult protective services training programs. Carson Fletcher's scheme demonstrated how financial predators exploit family trust, medical authority, and time pressure to steal from vulnerable elderly victims. The Hayes case shows how families can fight back, Detective Walsh concluded, but it required courage, planning, and willingness to take risks most people wouldn't take. 6 months after Carson's scheme collapsed, Charles remained in his own home, managing his own finances and living independently. His $890,000 retirement account was secure, protected by legal safeguards that would prevent future manipulation attempts. The man who thought he could steal from a confused old man had underestimated the power of family loyalty and the quiet determination of a 67-year-old mechanic who refused to let his brother become a victim. 1 year later, Charles and I were working together in my garage. He'd started helping me with bookkeeping. His meticulous record-keeping skills proved perfect for organizing customer files and tracking inventory. Russell, the Anderson's Camry needs new brake pads, Charles said, reviewing the inspection checklist. Tom wants to know the total cost before authorizing work. Tell him $180 for parts and labor, I replied from under the hood of a 2016 Honda Civic. Same price I quoted last month. Charles had moved his daily routine to include regular visits to my shop, not because he needed supervision, but because he enjoyed the work and appreciated the company. Dr. Norton's quarterly evaluations continued confirming his excellent cognitive function. Your brother's mental acuity remains exceptional, Dr. Norton reported during his latest assessment. His memory, reasoning, and judgment are excellent for any age. Linda stopped by every Tuesday after her nursing shifts. Our relationship had strengthened considerably since Carson's arrest and conviction. Dad, I owe you an apology that I can never fully repay, Linda said during one visit. I let Carson manipulate my medical knowledge to doubt Uncle Charles's competency. You trusted someone you loved, I replied. That's not a character flaw. It's human nature. Carson Fletcher received a 4-year prison sentence for elder fraud, financial abuse, and conspiracy. The judge's remarks were pointed and unforgiving. Mr. Fletcher exploited professional credentials and family relationships to prey on vulnerable elderly victims, Judge Morrison stated. This represents a profound betrayal of trust that demands significant punishment. Restitution requirements included $127,000 to Charles and additional payments to Carson's other victims. His professional reputation was permanently destroyed. Linda's divorce was finalized 6 months after Carson's conviction. She moved to a smaller apartment and focused on rebuilding her life without the financial pressure of Carson's expensive tastes. I'm happier now than I've been in years, Linda confided. Carson's lifestyle demands were exhausting. Living simply feels like freedom. The broader impact of our case extended throughout the community. Attorney Whitman reported a 40% increase in elderly clients seeking protective legal measures after learning about Carson's scheme. The Hayes case educated people about financial predator tactics, Attorney Whitman explained. Families are now more alert to warning signs and more willing to ask difficult questions. Dr. Norton incorporated our case into her medical school teaching curriculum. The Hayes brothers demonstrated how family advocacy can protect elderly independence better than institutional care. Detective Walsh used our investigation techniques in training programs for adult protective services. Russell Hayes showed how careful documentation and strategic thinking can expose elder abuse schemes that might otherwise succeed. Charles established new boundaries that protected his independence while maintaining family connections. Financial decisions required consultation with Attorney Whitman. Medical questions went directly to Dr. Norton. Family concerns were discussed openly with Linda and me. I learned that accepting help doesn't mean surrendering control, Charles reflected. The difference is choosing advisors versus having decisions made for you. My own life had changed significantly. The experience taught me that quiet observation and methodical planning could be more powerful than confrontation or argument. 40 years of fixing engines taught me one thing. I often told people who asked about the case, when something's broken, you find the source of the problem and fix it properly. Charles and I had also learned something important about our relationship. Despite different life paths, our bond as twins remained strong enough to motivate extraordinary action when family was threatened. We spent decades being polite strangers, Charles said. Carson Fletcher accidentally gave us back our brotherhood. The most important boundary we established was simple. Family decisions would always involve full transparency, independent verification, and respect for individual autonomy. Sometimes protecting family means becoming someone you never thought you could be, whether that's an undercover investigator, a fierce advocate, or simply a brother willing to put family loyalty above personal comfort. If this story resonates with you, share it with someone who might need to hear it. And tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to know our message reached people who understand that family protection sometimes requires extraordinary measures. The garage where Charles and I work together every day serves as a reminder that the strongest foundations are built through loyalty, careful attention to detail, and the willingness to fix what's broken, whether it's an engine or a family under attack.